And good afternoon. It's Thursday. Welcome to Deering Live. We are thrilled to be here today. And thank you so much for everybody for tuning in. This is going to be a fun one. Today's guest is Seva Venet, all the way from Louisiana, New Orleans. How are you doing, Seva?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Jamie.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have you here. And with us, as always, is Mr. Bandrowski. Hey, Dave, how are you?
All right. How you doing?
Very well, very well. For those of you that maybe don't know Seva as well as we do, Seva Venet has traveled the world with a who's who of New Orleans traditional jazz musicians. He plays a six-string banjo specifically, which is a veer away for Deering Live for us. We haven't done too much on the six-string, so we're really happy that we could do this today. But he plays in the style of the great Danny Barker. He is also a historian of the banjo in New Orleans music. Please welcome, like I said, Seva Venet. Would you like to open us up with a little ditty, a little tune to get us warmed up and tell the world what you're about?
Sure.
All right. Take it away, sir.
That's just a little while to stay here.
Yeah, sounds great. It's good to hear. Good to hear those tunes again. It's been a while. Why don't we kind of get into your history of a little bit and let people know a little bit about you? Like, how'd you get started playing jazz and traditional New Orleans jazz?
Well, it started when I first started playing guitar. I had a step-grandfather who was a jazz aficionado, and he had about 12,000 LPs, and
Wow.
he played mostly piano, but he also, I found out after he passed that he played as well. But when he found out I was learning guitar, he started sending me transcriptions and recordings, and among those were Louis Armstrong's Hot Five recordings and some Jelly Roll Morton and Charlie Christian, and I really fell in love with that Benny Goodman stuff. And so when I started pursuing jazz studies, I found that what they teach you in the colleges and most teachers, they teach you from a more modern perspective, like post Charlie Parker. But what I really fell in love with was the early early jazz, and so so what happened was I would listen to these records and transcribe the solos and everything, and it wasn't I had been listening to Annie Barker on records and Johnny St. Cyr for many years before I picked up a banjo. It wasn't until I came to New Orleans that I started playing banjo, and that's kind of an interesting story too. I'll just kind of give you that continuum there. So before I left Los Angeles, which is where I was born and where I began playing professionally, I was working with a clarinet player who played in the early New Orleans style. He played in the George Lewis style, which if you're not familiar, he's a wonderful old-time clarinet player from the generation of Louis Armstrong and from the generation of the first jazz musicians. And so this guy played some of those, a lot of those tunes, and in that style. And I just loved it. It was almost like folk music, and that was what attracted me to it. I was brought up in pop and folk and blues music, and so I loved that New Orleans music and traditional jazz is accessible like a folk music. Even though originally the music was a dance music, it's still music for the people, and there's a lot of overlap of the dance music and the folk music. So um, when I came to New Orleans in 1999, I I was just so surprised to hear people still playing the early traditional music. And in Los Angeles, it was so rare to find people that knew, respected, or even played that music. I mean, it was like 10 million. So um, when I came here and I heard people playing those old tunes that I had learned by association with Mike McClelland and the band that I played with him, I knew that I needed to come here and continue um, those studies. And what really drew me in and uh, made me feel like I could really become a part of the community was a band that was led by the late great Anthony Tuba Fats, who was playing in Jackson Square, which is a public square where when there's not a pandemic, thousands of people out there during the peak season every day. And I'm serious, thousands of people. That's not an exaggeration. And there was a band there in the middle of all this that was between 8 and 25 and maybe even more people every day during the peak season. And all year round, there would be at least 8 to 10 musicians playing in that square. And it would rotate. It'd be different people all the time. And it was just such a beautiful um, thing to witness and then to be a part of for 5 years, where I just, when I did move here and became part of that band, um, busking every day. We played all day long, every day, 7 days a week. And if it was too hot in the summertime, we would just wait it out until we could go and get an hour or two in. And if it was rainy season, then we would just sit under the cabildo, which is into the space that we play in, and come out between raindrops and play sets. But we did it every day for, I was with that band for close to 5 years until Tuba passed. And it was during that apprenticeship, which I consider like my second apprenticeship in New Orleans jazz, the first one being with McClellan in Los Angeles. And it was during my apprenticeship with that band that I took up the banjo. I was playing guitar, acoustic guitar mainly, and then steel guitar. And there was a banjo player that played in that band every day, and there were other guitar players, as well as all the horn players that you hear in the New Orleans traditional music: trumpets, cornets, trombones, clarinets, tubas, drum sets, including bass drums and snare drums, and other instruments too, like baritone horns. But anyway, so it was while I was playing with that band those years that I first took up the banjo, and that was in 2002. And I took it up because I'd already been playing in that style. You see, Tuba Fats and a number of the other musicians in the band had started their careers with under the apprenticeship of Danny Barker. Danny Barker had passed by the time I came to New Orleans, but I've gotten to play with many musicians that knew him, played with him, or were even related to him, and they all tell me, "You sound like Danny Barker," and they're quite grateful that I'm carrying on the Danny Barker tradition. But I learned that through playing with these other musicians, playing, absorbing those rhythms, and being a part of just chunking away at those rhythms, the Mardi Gras beats and the Latin beats and the swing beats, all day long, with all of these great musicians who all bring to the bigger ensemble. So finding my place within that ensemble really helped me to find the New Orleans, the in the ensembles that I've traveled around the world with.
Yeah, I remember when you were playing in that band. We didn't know each other. We might have met in passing, but I remember you playing with that band. The trombone shorty was in that band now and then, right? And David Andrews, and um, it was a good band. You had a lot of good players at that time.
I was amazing for me. I mean, there were people in that band that had toured with Charles and BB King and Fats Domino, and they're just are on the street every day, right next to me, giving me support and teaching me playing. I remember Frederick Shepard was one of my favorite
Yeah, Shep,
players.
I remember. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, just play these rhythms, and you just start to pick up on it, and you think you have it down until you get in a situation like that, and you realize. And Danny Barker he was interviewed one time in 1992, a couple years before he passed, and he said, I'm paraphrasing him and put it in my own context, but he said, if you take, and he was a very funny storyteller. Besides being a great musician, he was a storyteller and a raconteur. But he said you could take Eskimos from Alaska, from the Pole, and bring their Eskimo dogs and get them to play with New Orleans musicians, and they will become New Orleans musicians. So that's, there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what do you think you learned from playing from busking so much? A number of our artists that we've interviewed kind of cut their teeth busking. One was one of our main artists, Jens Kruger, I know he learned a lot how to entertain from busking, because he immediately saw if you made money, if you're entertaining the crowd or not. It was as kind of as simple as that. But what do you think you learned from just playing in the streets and working the crowd for tips all the time like that?
A great question. Let me just say first, I should have said from the beginning, thank you very much for inviting me here. And I've got a chance to check out some of your interviews, and it's really great company to be interviewed with all these other fantastic people. I checked out that was it Brad Davis and Pete, and so thank you for inviting me, and I'm just so grateful to be involved with this company that makes this banjo that I've just fallen in love with, and I'm so grateful to be playing today. And so to answer your question, one of the most important things that I learned busking was, and this is one of the things that I learned differentiates New Orleans musicians from other places, is endurance. When you play all day long, I mean, imagine you're in a 24-piece band, okay? You're busking, so I mean, all the different subtleties I can't go into, but I can tell you that when there's a big band, 10 people or more, anything more than that, it gets kind of stressful because everybody's supposed to contribute, and it's hard to contribute when there's so many people. It's like everybody has to play a solo during like a half an hour set. You don't want the sets to be too long, and you don't want them to be too short. So, and you have to have some kind of continuation, but everybody's kind of has to pitch in. And sometimes people get lazy out there playing on the street because there's, Tuba might be the boss, but it's hard for him to keep track of everybody, and he wasn't always there. So who's going to be the person to tell this person that, if you don't play, then you're not going to get anything out of the tip jar? So what happens is everybody is encouraged to play a solo for every song, or at least every other song. Everybody should be playing solos. So as a rhythm player, that means you have to play a lot. You're accompanying every solo. You have to accompany all day long and then play solos on top of that sometimes. So that's one of the big things that I took away from that experience, is being able to have a lot of endurance. And the aspect of endurance in New Orleans music goes back to the Second Street parades, or jazz funerals, they used to call them. And these musicians would be expected to play, and they still are, for hours. Sometimes the parades would last 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. They don't generally last that long anymore, except for maybe during Mardi Gras. But for the horn musicians, that's a lot of endurance to be able to play that long, and you learn how to pace yourself, and you learn endurance. Some other stuff I learned, like I said before, was the New Orleans beat, a variety of rhythms. New Orleans is considered the northernmost city in the Caribbean, and there's a lot of Caribbean feeling here. And just like any island in the Caribbean, the rhythms are different if you move from island to island. So when you come to New Orleans, the rhythm here is going to be different. So it's a matter of absorbing all those different rhythms, and they keep evolving. There's so many, from the early jazz, Jelly Roll Morton and Louis Armstrong, Latin style rhythms, through the swing and Mardi Gras rhythms. There's so many, and then you get into rock and roll and Fats Domino and all the R&B stuff. There's so much rhythm to absorb, and being in a band like that, as I said before, when you have so many musicians, they all are bringing something else to the table, and they all have a different approach rhythmically, harmonically, and repertoire-wise as well. So another thing that I learned from that band is an extensive repertoire, which I'm still expanding on. They say in New Orleans that if you know the top 40, which are like the top 40 trad tunes, then you can work. But it's really about 100 songs. And, I'm not sure how many tunes I really know. It may be a few hundred or 1,000. But I know that when we started the quarantine, I started to do live streams after about a month. And I was doing them 3 times a week. And I figured out that I was able to do about 40 something hours before I had to repeat anything. I was kind of challenging myself. So that was interesting. Playing solo, I could play for 40 hours without repeating myself. And that comes from just playing in New Orleans and keep learning new tunes. Anyway.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you brought up the aspect of rhythm in New Orleans music, because I agree 100% with you there. And would you want to play demonstrate any of those different rhythms that you hear and play?
Sure. So generally, this it's a New Orleans music is a collective music. It's like bluegrass in that way, and there's a lot of similarities between bluegrass and New Orleans music, incidentally. But so the rhythms kind of come out depending on which ensemble you're in. They come out differently depending on who you're playing with. But having said that, I'll kind of give you some basic examples of a variety of, or at least a few different kinds of rhythms. So when we started this interview, I played Just a Little While to Stay Here, and I was doing a lot of. So that was but I was doing a lot of this kind of. And that rhythm is what Danny Barker referred to as a rigmarole style, which is kind of a mixture, or to mix things up. The way he said it is the rigmarole, the banjo's role in the dance bands, pre-jazz and in the early jazz, was to lift the band, to lift the band, and the best way to do that is with the rigmarole. And so the rigmarole can be it's a groove, really. It's a groove, but it doesn't have to be one specific rhythm. It's just this groove that can go a lot of different places. And as I said, it depends on who you're playing with. But I'll give you an idea of how I can kind of move it around a little bit. So if I start here. It's kind of organic. It's an organic kind of thing where I'm using that groove, and I'm just trying not to move too many chords just so you could hear the basic rhythm. But I try to add in a lot of syncopation to it. So if I'm doing, that's not really syncopated, but if I go, and then add in these kind of triplets. So it's quite a variety. The key is polyrhythms. Polyrhythms where you have like 3/4. So if I'm playing 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E. So go from that. Anyway, I'm not. It's not very cohesive the way I'm presenting it, but I think you get the idea. Here's like a Latin thing. So if you're playing like St. Louis blues, this is so that's like a minor habanero, they call it sometimes, or they might call it a rumba. So the rumbas were real popular in early New Orleans music, and still are in the traditional bands. You hear it like in something like Mardi Gras Mambo. So, yeah. So that's kind of a combination between the rigmarole and the habanero rhythm. The habanero rhythm it's really simple. The essence of it is just like a dotted quarter note, eighth note, followed by 2 quarter notes. So, and then you add some. So what else? Second line beat. A second line is in New Orleans. The term second line is a lot. It can be defining a lot of different things. It could be a dance. They call like a freestyle dance is a second line. A beat is a second line. There could be a second line song. So I'll give you an example of a second line song. This is the Paul Barbaran second line. So that's the basic melody. And if I was to play, it'd be. When you hear that beat, New Orleans, you see everybody get in line and do the dance they call the second line. So that's a lot of rigmarole, and it fits really well in that second line beat. And you'll notice that the I was playing some color tones in that as well. So we'll get into that in a second too. That's a big part of the Danny Barker style.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a few different rhythms there for you. Latin second line, rigmarole. What else? I mean, there's this basic swing rhythm, which is in New Orleans music. This is kind of now. It's in college they would call that a Freddie Green style. it's my belief that although Freddie Green is a genius of rhythm guitar, and every jazz guitar player should study him. Danny Barker did so much more, and by studying Danny Barker, you'd be studying the entire history of jazz. And he was a phenomenal banjo player, so it'd be something that would be a great introduction to New Orleans music and New Orleans banjo or jazz banjo would be just to study the style of Danny Barker. And if you can find some of his recordings, which there are quite a few of him playing and featuring him on banjo, you'll be surprised at what you can do with one of these instruments. It's unbelievable that so many that people haven't picked that. He was really quite a genius of the banjo and the guitar, but his work on the banjo is really unprecedented in any circle, really. So anyway,
While comparing the styles of Danny Barker and Freddie Green, would you say that Danny Barker usually played kind of bigger, fuller chords, more strings, where Freddie Green often did, like 2-note chords, 2 or 3-note chords? Would you differentiate it that way a little bit?
No, I would say that it depends on the context. You see, Freddie Green was playing in Basie's band, so that's why he couldn't play really bigger chords because it didn't make any sense for him to be. He had to be playing these kind of chords. And when Danny Barker played in Cab Calloway's orchestra for a decade, and when he played with other big bands, that played. In the smaller ensembles, then he would start adding those other chord notes, what people think of them as fat chords, but really I think the fat chords are these ones where you're using the fat strings. That's the way Danny described it. But what I forgot to say before about Freddie Green was that Freddie Green style of playing four on the floor came from New Orleans and banjo playing four on the floor. And when you listen to the early Jelly Roll Morton and later was Duke Ellington, when on his early recordings when he was using banjo players, he was modeling his band after New Orleans, that jelly sound, and so that floor was what the swing bands picked up on. Style of guitar playing came from banjo. So yeah, but Danny did from Freddie on the guitar and the banjo was that he exploring and adding a lot more color tones to his chords. So instead of playing like Freddie, these chords, or if you were a banjo player and you picked up a 6-string banjo and you just wanted to play jazz, you might be playing these kind of chords. And I've seen people do it, and it'll work. But if you need to make a gig, whatever. But Danny was a genius, like Freddie Green, of voicing the chords to where they will cut through more. If you think of a 4-string banjo, tenor banjo, which was also popular in New Orleans jazz, the 4-string is tuned in fifths, and so the notes are spread out more. And by doing that, by the notes being spread out more, it's naturally going to have more of a sound because of the harmonic overtones aren't overlapping as much. That's these kind of chords, these big fat bar chords, aren't really going to work as well because they're too bunched together. There's too many overtones bunched up together. And so if you think as if you're playing a tenor guitar, is one way to do it, and spread the notes out more, then you'll find that you get more sound in the ensemble. You can project more. And being how this music, New Orleans jazz, is ensemble music, it's a great thing to explore and be able to do when you need to do it. So that's one thing, is spreading the notes out. So this kind of chord instead of all this, you can just play that for a seventh chord. The other thing is to add color tones, such as sixes and nines and 13s and altered chords. One of Danny Barker's favorite things is this kind of. So this is a 6/9 chord. I mean, if you're into bluegrass, and I mean, if all you play is bluegrass, you might not appreciate those kind of sounds, but it's really quite sophisticated and advanced, and it works really well in jazz ensembles, unless you have people that really don't want you to play anything that sounds remotely modern. Usually, I can get away with playing those chords in any traditional band, but you have to be careful because a lot of early traditionalists, they really want to kind of keep it pre-bebop, pre-Thelonious Monk, pre-Charlie Parker, and so you can't do that kind of a chord with this chord unless you. It's like I said, it's all about context. You kind of have to know when and where to do it. Let me give you an example. Here's another tune in the style of Danny Barker. This is a famous blues tune that is also played by bluegrass and folk bands and blues bands. It's called Careless Love.
Yeah, terrific. One thing you did in there, you did a little tremolo. I know as a but I play tenor banjo, and a lot of people ask how do you do the tremolo, or how do you practice the tremolo, and also what context do you use that? Because some beginning banjo players use it too much. On 4-string or 6-string banjo players, they kind of are tremoloing way too much. So
Yeah.
kind of how would you practice that for somebody that's trying to learn it, and then where would you place it now and then?
Well, first let me say that one of the reasons to play tremolo is the banjo is being kind of, I always think of it as like a drum or a percussive instrument. And so you don't have a lot of sustain on it. So that is like it's like if you're melodically, it's for sustain. And how I would practice it, I don't generally practice tremolo, but I'll tell you what I'd practice. But if I did, what I would do is I'd like, so just playing sorry, I'm trying to, I should have turned my camera around. Trying to get on my hand here on camera. There we go. So just playing like a chromatic scale, or you could just pick any scale and just playing 16th notes. But what I like to practice, what I do, I wake up early in the morning and I practice for about 40 minutes every day. And I always start off just doodling, and I start off with chromatics. So I'll just, and I have my metronome on. always with the metronome. And then I'll go into some kind of scale. I don't do the same thing every day. I like to, especially when I'm just starting, I like to be a little creative and get my creative juices running. So I might go into a major scale or harmonic minor. And then I start to move into, you could do this, polyrhythms, going back and forth. Also, what was I going to say? Then I might go into whole tone scales. Now, how much do I use this stuff on the gig? I don't. I rarely use that, but it's just a great thing to be able to open up your ears at the beginning of a practice session and to really get your picking together. And another thing I'd say, if you're practicing your picking and your tremolo or whatever kind of picking you're working on, and I'm using a flat pick, it's a Dunlap pick, to make sure that you're using a technique that is almost effortless. So if you're working too hard, you're going to hurt your hands. And so, you got your tendons and your joints. And if you really want to play for the long run, which I do, I intend to do this till I die. And hopefully, I'll live forever. But anyway, so you gotta try to, I don't know why this is doing that. You try to make it effortless and try to get, while you're still getting a full tone. And for some reason, my little thing here is I'm out of batteries again, which doesn't make sense. Anyway, I don't know why, but it just said I'm getting low on battery. I'm plugged in, so if you lose me, that's why. Let me just do this real quick. So yeah, that's it. So that's how I practice tremolo. And does that answer your question?
Yeah. That's terrific, and it's terrific because I also noticed, in your examples, you're playing chord melodies and not doing much single notes. So it's good to see that you're in your practice sessions. You're doing those single notes. When you're playing in a band, do you take single note solos, or is it mostly chord melody solos?
I do both. I try to mix it up. I try to. I remember I was attending a Tommy Tedesco seminar once in L.A. He was a friend of my father. He worked with my father and my uncle, and he was talking about how when he's in the studio, he might, and he's supposed to improvise. He says, "Well, I'll just throw in a slide, and then I'll do some hammer-ons, and then, it's like you have all these variety of technical things, and that's your palette." So, yeah, like if I'm playing "Careless Love." Might have go up and register. Anyway, so yeah, so I'll do single line stuff, but I'll do, and blues. You might throw in some blues. You have to kind of be ready to, if you're in a live performance and you're playing the same kind of solos at every song. I hear back from the audience during the break. People will tell me, I like what you're doing, and if I'm doing a lot of different things, they mention that too. So I'm looking for that kind of feedback. People to tell me that they like the variety of techniques and approaches that I'm taking to the different songs. And that's another thing. Every song has a different kind of heart to it. Every song has a different um, rhythm to it. In Cuban music, when they refer to a key, it's not necessarily like G or C, but it's the rhythmic key. And in New Orleans music, it's the same, but it's not just, um, you know, every song can have a different key, a different rhythmic feel. And so, uh, so I'm prepared to try. See if we need to wrap it up in 10 minutes. We can. Okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't read that. I had to block it out. So anyway, so yeah, I try to apply to a variety of different techniques and musical approaches. All the stuff I mentioned, color tones, polyrhythms. Do I want to mess with the rhythm of the song, the phrasing? Do I want to play it single line or chord melody? So all these things come in. That's like my palette when I'm improvising. That's one of the beautiful things about New Orleans jazz is that there's, since Louis Armstrong especially, there's so much room and opportunity to explore your own personal um, voice and your own personal um, uh, approach to the music. And so that's what keeps it interesting. And that's why I play this music. When I was a teenager, I wanted to be a rock and roller, but then I met some musicians that were touring all over the world, and they weren't happy because they had to play the same songs the same way every single night. And I realized that I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be playing a music where I could always grow and always be learning and creating something new. And jazz is that music, and traditional New Orleans jazz satisfies that for me.
Cool. Do you want to talk a little bit about your banjo that you're playing?
Sure. This
Because
is
it's an open back banjo, isn't it?
yes, it is. So this is Danny Barker played an open back banjo, and he played a Vega. This is actually, it says Vega on there. It's actually a Deering banjo that was built, I think, shortly after Deering acquired the rights and the specs to the to the Vegas. And it's a little bit different from Danny's. The head is a little bit smaller. And I'm hoping someday I can get them to build me one a little bigger. But I love this banjo because partially because the open back. So I have a B6. That was my first Deering banjo, and it's got the resonator on the back, but it's a lot heavier. And sometimes I have to march in New Orleans. You get in second lines and you have to stroll around at brunches, and it gets heavy. And you know, I'm not getting any younger. My body isn't able to take all that. So this banjo is, I think, 6 or 7 pounds or something, and I may be a little bit off there, but it's really comfortable for those kind of gigs. And with the open back, I have found that um, it's got a few advantages over the resonator. And one of them is your body is the resonator. And so you can actually change the tone of the instrument by moving the banjo around. And so I'm going to stand up here and show you how. You can see how the sound changes, and the volume also changes too. So if I need a little more volume, I might take it away from my body. Or one thing I learned playing with brass bands like Tuba Fats band and the Treme brass band, who I've been lucky enough to play with for many years, I can take this banjo and put it against the bass drum, and the bass drum becomes kind of an amplifier. So it kind of is a super banjo sound. And so that's a lot of fun too. What else about this banjo? This is the Senator V6. Shortly after you started making them, Daring started making them, I, I, I was looking for this exact instrument. And so I contacted Daring and said, I want to endorse that banjo. I love it. And so I've been doing that ever since. I think that was 2006, I want to say. It was shortly after Katrina. And so, yeah, it's great. Lightweight. I love the open back. and the neck's real easy to play. And you know, in Louisiana we have 2 seasons. You know, hot, super hot, and then not so hot. But although sometimes we have a freeze, we usually have a freeze about once a year. And when that happens, the instrument changes so much that the action changes a lot. So it doesn't matter what instrument it is; they all do it. Pianos and guitars and banjos. So I love this because it's so easy to adjust. And you know, you go on YouTube and you daring videos show you how to make those quick adjustments. And I just go in there and just make my little quick adjustment, and it just takes me like 5 minutes. You know, I mean, it takes longer to change my strings. But anyway, yeah. So that's my Deering V6 banjo.
Is there a time
Also,
when you choose the resonator banjo over the open back, or are you mainly playing the open back most of the time now?
I mainly play the open back, and there's 2 reasons. Well, for one thing, see, Danny Barker had this trick when he started playing, when he went back to the banjo in the 1940s. He was modeled as playing, before that, he was playing tenor banjo. And then he decided that he was going to play 6 string and model his approach after Johnny St. Cyr, who played with the Hot Fives and Hot Seven and Jelly Roll Morton. And so what he did was he took off the 6 string. So it was actually a 5 string banjo, though without a drone string. And he tuned it up a step and a half. And he did that so he could get kind of a twangier sound. And my other banjo, the one with the resonance, I did that just so I could like kind of live with it and experience it that way. It's a little confusing sometimes, but when I want to play that way, with that kind of a sound, I'll use my resonator banjo. And also just for variety, for tone variety.
And what about playing guitar versus banjo? What situations do you choose one over the other?
Yeah, sometimes I have a hard time doing that because I love both instruments. Even in my string band, sometimes I play Hawaiian style steel guitar, or I'll play my old Gibson L7 guitar for the Latin stuff, and then I'll use this for like New Orleans banjo features or Creole tunes, or sometimes Latin tunes or ragtime tunes. And ragtime songs, I'll be playing single line in harmony with a mandolin. So it's hard for me to decide, but like for it's some bands I play with, they choice. For example, I work quite a bit with Dr. Michael White when there's not a pandemic going on, and he likes the banjo like 99.9% of the time. It's banjo. It's you know, I don't even ask him. It's going to be banjo. And with Treme Brass Band, that's usually banjo. Um, it's funny because a lot of the solo gigs I do, like I'll play brunches, or sometimes I'll one of the steamboats and play. I'm sure you've done these too, Dave, where you're playing during the dinner cruises that go up and down the river. And I find the banjo to be a great instrument for that because you know you have a lot of stuff going on, and the banjo, you know, you're strolling around, but the banjo can project quite loud and melodically, so you can get a lot of sound out there. Or as an accompaniment instrument, you can get a lot of rhythm, which is really helpful for, you know, you're kind of making up, you're the whole band. So now with the banjo, you're the drummer and the piano player and the horn player, or you can be singing the melody perhaps. But the banjo is great for that. And this instrument, the 6 string banjo, I find to be um, very, very practical for that, and very useful because you can get, like I said, a lot of jazz harmonies, a lot of full chords. With playing the New Orleans repertoire, it's very important to have. You got to have those harmonies. You know, you got to have that. That's what makes the music swing, is that harmonic movement, and this is a great instrument for it. yeah, sometimes it's hard to choose, but
Yeah, it's
I love
it's
them all.
it's almost nice when the band leader chooses it for you, because then you don't have to make the decision.
Yeah,
You just know that this is it.
yeah, and I hate to ask when someone hires me. I hate to be like, "Do you want banjo or guitar, electric guitar?" You know, just
Right,
sometimes they don't want to be bothered, so I'll just kind of bring
right,
whatever.
or they
If
don't know either. They don't really know what they want. Um, have you dabbled at all in four-string banjo? Somebody was asking in the chat, why did you choose six-string over the four-string banjo?
That's a great question. I do have a four-string banjo, and I have spent time with it. I've never played it on a gig. I don't trust myself enough yet. Um, and the reason I chose six-string banjo rather than four-string, because when I started off playing banjo, it was well, it was the reason I started playing banjo is I was playing in the Danny Barker style, and I had happened to have a gig one day on a Mardi Gras float. It was Harry Connick Jr.'s parade, the Orpheus parade, and we were in the first float. It was a big boat, and it was a four-piece band: Miss Doreen and her husband, and Shannon Powell, who's a world famous drummer with Wynton Marsalis and Diane Reeves and Harry Connick Jr. and many, 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 many other people. And I knew who he was, but he didn't know who I was. And I knew that he had learned and studied under Danny Barker. So I was playing the steel guitar, and I we're playing Mardi Gras music, of course. And I thought to myself, well, we can't talk because it's so loud out here on this float, but I'm just going to play Danny Barker style the whole night and see what happens, you know. So I was just playing all this Danny Barker stuff, and at the end of the gig, he said, "Do you need a ride to your car?" So on the way to the car, he said, "Man, you sound like Danny Barker. I came up with Danny Barker, and you sound like him. I'm so glad you're carrying on that tradition. I want you to get a six-string banjo and come by my house." And he told me his address, and we're going to do some things. And so when Shannon Powell tells you to get a six-string banjo, you get a six-string banjo. And so I got the six-string banjo because that's what Danny Barker played. Uh, and the rest is history. And through Shannon Powell, Shannon introduced me to the people of Preservation Hall and the Palm Court. And I eventually did several tours with Shannon in Japan and Taiwan. And so it's been a real great collaboration. And I'm really happy and grateful and lucky to be feeling those shoes of the person that's really carrying on the Danny Barker tradition. So that's why I play. That's why I love the. I mean, nobody's doing it. You see, nobody's really carrying on that tradition. So for me to go and start playing a tenor banjo wouldn't really make sense because there are already a lot of tenor banjo players that are really great. So yeah, that's the main reason.
Yeah, having having Shannon tell you that, it's pretty affirming words there.
Yeah.
It's great that you've had a long relationship with him too, playing with him. He's, for those that don't know, he is an incredible world-class drummer.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
what about for somebody learning to play New Orleans jazz? What would be some advice, some kind of overriding, and maybe not specific things. So even if they're playing, they might be playing another instrument even, but they're just kind of learning the style. Is there any kind of words, any grand words of advice?
Well, anytime you learn a new genre, it's all about harmony, melody, rhythm, and repertoire. And if you're coming at it from a bluegrass repertoire, you'll find that there's a lot of overlap, especially in spiritual tunes and blues tunes. So you could start with those. Um, you know, you really need to play with other musicians. It's really important. It's a community music. It's a communal music and it's a community music, which means it's functional in the whole community. It's dance music, so you need that audience as well. Um, so you start with the harmony, melody, and rhythm, and the repertoire, and um, every genre is going to have a different approach to those things. And um, I would say, especially if you're learning traditional jazz, learn the fundamentals of harmony, all about the triads, and study some basic Bach. And there's a wonderful book called The Contrapuntal Harmonic Technique of the 17th Century. Um, just try the first 7 chapters of that book and try to apply it to your instrument. That is a great for um, harmony. And the triad, I play the triads and all open and closed voicings all up and down the neck. So open up that neck. Melody, melody isn't just about playing, it's also about phrasing melodies. So how many different ways can you phrase a melody? If you're playing it the same exact way every time, it's not jazz. It's not interesting, really. You want to try to keep things interesting, and the way to keep it interesting is, as I said before, keep learning and trying new things and new techniques, and listen to other players. Listen to Louis Armstrong. That's a real good key. And listen to people like Bunk Johnson and George Lewis and Jelly Roll Morton, and of course the great players of traditional jazz. Listen to the George Lewis bands where the tenor banjo players are just playing 4/4 all day long. That's all they play, but they keep it interesting because of the voicings they're using and the accuracy of their harmonies. And and the rhythms, you will learn rhythms um, by listening to records, but also by playing with a lot of different people. I can't emphasize that enough. It's really about playing with different people and absorbing different rhythms and different approaches and rhythmic approaches and harmonic and melodic approaches. Learn some Mardi Gras music, what else? Learn some ragtime music. Early jazz was, before it was early jazz, it was dance music, but it was also, um, what made jazz was a mixture of different genres. So you had spiritual music, church music, and marching band music. They called them they called them jazz funerals, but before they called them jazz funerals, they were just I can't think of the term, but now they call them second line bands. But so learn some marches, learn some ragtime, Latin tunes, pop tunes of the not just since the 1960s, but since the 1860s. And so you have to kind of dip into all those different kinds of genres, and they all have different harmony, melody, and rhythms that you can bring to the bigger table of jazz. So I would say that's a lot of information, but it's a good place to start if you want to learn some traditional
It's good
jazz.
advice. Yeah, it's very good advice. Um, you've also done a lot of clinics in schools, and I know, and as you're kind of a keeper of the torch of the Danny Barker style, and just uh, traditional jazz as well, New Orleans jazz. What, I guess, kind of two questions. What are some of, what do you, when you're going into schools, how do you kind of inspire some of the kids, and how important do you think it is to be kind of a pass on the tradition, as Danny was very famous for doing, maybe for just any musician in whatever style they're doing, to pass on the tradition of what they do.
Yeah, I mean I can't emphasize it enough. I'm glad you brought it up. I mentioned before that it's a communal music, it's a community music, and so passing it on is integral to the music. And I'm standing on the shoulders of Danny and many, many other musicians came before me. And it wouldn't make any sense at all for me to not do everything I can to try to pass the music on and to keep it going, especially to the younger generation and especially to people in New Orleans, where it's our heritage, but it's not just people in New Orleans. It's the heritage of all Americans and all people that are, interested in community. It's all people. It's a people's music. It's a folk music. It's intended to be inclusive, and so teaching is kind of built into it. You have to do it, and if you don't think that way, you're not ever going to really be able to understand the music and play the music properly. I don't think so. Yeah, so it's of the utmost importance. And how I approach it is, well, I've been lucky to teach kids from ages 2 to 92, and I've worked in a lot of schools here in New Orleans, and I've really enjoyed it, and learned so much. One of the things that I love to do, especially with the younger kids, is "Et là-bas," and "Et là-bas" is an old Creole song, and it's got a built-in call and response. So there's that aspect of music that you teach, and it's also a great opportunity to really talk about the beauty of this instrument, the banjo, as this instrument play, unlike the drums or the clarinet or the trumpet or trombone, you can play melody and harmony and rhythm. So you can do the piano and the horn part and the percussion part. So you got the melody. So then the rhythm, and I usually, I go through and I give definitions for all of these three things, the three main: harmony, melody, and rhythm. So we might start with just that basic habanero rhythm, and then the harmony of this tune, which is not just one chord, but also a chord progression, a chord and a chord progression. So in this tune, so you have all three things put together, and you have the whole band here. So it's a great tune for that, and it's fun to. "Et là-bas" in Creole means "Hey there," so we get to kind of have this call and response. And I found that when I was doing a residency at a school, I always bring in my banjo the first day and always sing that song. And for the rest of the school year, every time I would walk through the hallways, there'd be at least several kids going "Et là-bas." So it's a great thing. It's like you got it, and you put it in your pocket, and you got it forever. And so that's generally where I start with that. And I also, talk about a song, talking about Creole culture. Where does that come from? And how is that related to the banjo? And how is that related to American music? And I really think that it's something that all Americans should know and appreciate. They should be teaching this stuff in all public schools about New Orleans music and Creole culture, and how the banjo came here from the Caribbean, from Africa, and how it has helped to shape our greater modern culture. And it's a tune like that is a great example for just like a link from the old Caribbean, New Orleans, and Creole culture, and how that somebody like Danny Barker, who would sing that song, how his tenure with like Cab Calloway and Billie Holiday, and later with Wynton Marsalis, Dr. John and the Dirty Dozen. So there's a continuation there, and it's real important that we keep bringing that forward.
Well, Seva, I think this is a great place to leave it. We're at the top of the hour, but and Jamie, do we have any questions on the chat right now to get to?
Hello. Thank you. That was amazing. That was fascinating to listen to in the background here. So thank you very much to it's like a personal lesson for the uneducated like myself when it comes to this particular genre of banjo playing. But there was one question in the other chat room from the site from Bernard, and he says, "I'm from New Orleans." He and had seen Danny Parker many times before he passed. He says, "I'm a guitar player, but I bought a 4-string plectrum banjo to play New Orleans style. Can you tell me where I can get instruction material for this particular style on plectrum, or should I switch to a 6-string? Any advice on that particular subject?"
Yeah, that's kind of a tricky question. Again, I would go back to what I said earlier about if you want to learn traditional jazz. I mean, all that stuff's going to apply. There's not going to be you're going to be able to get Danny Barker's rhythms and phrasing. That was one of the things that Danny was a master at, and I would suggest just listen to the Danny Barker records. This listener may know, there's a wonderful record called "Save the Bones," which is just in his guitar. But all the records that he did all banjo. Well, not all. He did it with an ensemble, but a feature record in the late 1940s, and there's so much great banjo on there. You can listen to that, and you'll be able to pick up on his phrasing there. But what you won't be able to do is you won't be able to play the voicings. And what I mean by that is these big, colorful chords that Dan loved. So that chord has 4 notes in it. Well, a plectrum has 4 strings to be able to get this color. There's some stuff you'll get and others you won't. I don't think that there's going to be a teacher that specifically could teach you that style unless they're all and have to be somebody from New Orleans. Did he say he was in New Orleans or from?
Yeah. He's in New Orleans. Yeah.
Huh.
So yeah.
I know him. I don't know.
Maybe. But yeah, so what you're saying is that the 6-string in comparison, it is, if my understanding is correct, is you're extending that color palette that is available to you as a musician.
Yes, the range is wider. You have more options for chord voicings.
Awesome.
But I mean, saying that, a plectrum has its advantages as because the strings are separated in fifth.
Mm-hmm.
You can do things on that you can't do on the 6-string. So it's really important to decide what you really want and what you really love and pursue that. I mean, if try both of them and see which one. If you really want to say Danny Barker, you got to get a 6-string banjo. But if you think you could get by without the color tones and just settle for his rhythms and phrasing, then you'll probably be okay with the plectrum.
I think that's pretty good advice, pretty sound advice. Thank you so much. David, before we go, any last words?
Just thanks a lot for doing this, Seva. It's great to have you on. Great to you got lots of good words of advice and everything. And also for people, they should check out your string band. We didn't really get to it too much, but the Storyville String Band of New Orleans, definitely check out. It's Seva's band, and you can find it on Apple Music and Spotify and all those things.
Yeah.
And
the website is at the bottom.
We just did.
Excuse me?
So the website is at the bottom of the
screen. Thank you so much.
Do you want to play
Thanks
us
again,
out? Try
guys.
and play
Thank
us
you
out?
very much. If I could remember this one. Let's see.